Welcome back to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. The archives and load up some other talks that I've got of these Bob Earl cassettes. I've had them sitting on a hard drive for some time now. I've decided to share them with you all. Let me know what you think. Some people loved Bob. Some people hated Bob. Bob was Bob, but he talked all over the world. I mean, he's from Los Angeles, Beverly Hills area, and did other things. I think he was a writer. Just click down below, like or subscribe, or both, like and subscribe. Just click down below, like and subscribe on my channel. It helps me out. Just a little click for you, doesn't cost you anything, and I'm bringing you some Bob Earl. And have a good day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our main speaker, Howard P.
My name is Howard Pohlenz, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk tonight. I'm always honored to speak at an AA meeting, and I'm grateful to be asked tonight. Thank you for your first talk. I'm not going to give as good a talk as she did, but it's going to take me 4 times as long. And I will, from time to time, when I'm talking, look at my watch. And I'll do that not to see what time it is, because I don't care. But I'll do it to give the secretary a sense of optimism that I do care. Just so he can relax. This is some of the people that were at my first, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous on the 24th of July, 1972, and I know at least 3 of you, Chuck and Lee and Chuck Cohen, Chuck Innes, and were at my first AA meeting. And that's I don't know, something very special to me about that. I think maybe Steve Suits also. And they're still here, and I'm still here, and over the period of time, as far as I know, we've never had a bad feeling toward each other. We've never been angry with each other. It's just been a hell of a good relationship. And I never had any of those before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I woke up this morning, and I felt good about my life. I have felt good about my life for quite a while when I woke up in the morning. But this morning I woke up and I found out that our house that we paid, that's on public record, $32,500 for in 1967 is closing escrow Friday for $272,500. So I was smiling a lot all day today, but I've smiled a lot for a long, long time. I feel good about myself. And in the big book it says, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, and for a long time I didn't particularly like that thing, you know, and I will tell you now, I want what I have. Nobody else needs, how in the hell could nobody else knows what I have. So how would they know that they want what I have? But I know what I have, and I want what I have. And I had never wanted what I had before in my life until I found it in Alcoholics Anonymous, until I found who I am and what I am here in AA. I can look back on my life and see that there was goodness in my life all my life, except for 1972. You know, the first 6 months of 1972 was down the toilet. But the times before that, there was a lot of goodness, but I never felt good. Chuck has the book over there, and one of the reasons he has the book is because he knows that I make up stuff and say that it's in the book in order to add credibility to my talk. I just make up page numbers, and nobody ever checks. But now Chuck got the book and kind of got me under his thumb there. But in the big book on page 45, it says, lack of power is our dilemma. And I know that was true for me. I not only I lacked so much power, and most assuredly, I lacked the power to feel good. In and of myself, I simply don't have the power to feel good, or really to be conscious of goodness in my life. In and of myself, I'm in a state of low-grade alert, always for what the hell's going to go wrong next. I mean, that was the way I felt, and that was the way I lived my life. And things went wrong. Things went wrong with God and me. When I was a little kid, I was in the Methodist church, and we prayed for it not to rain. So I was 4 or 5 years old, and we prayed for it not to rain so that the farmers could harvest their wheat. And that day it rained, and hailed, and the wind blew, and it wiped out 80% of the wheat in Sumner County, Kansas. And while nobody pointed their finger at me, I knew whose fault it was that it had rained. I knew who wasn't doing what God required of you to have the prayers answered. And if you're 4 or 5 years old and you feel guilty about wiping out the Kansas wheat crop, to start with, you've got an ego problem. But as a consequence of the ego problem, you don't feel good. And I didn't feel good. And I didn't feel good about the kind of, I wasn't the son my father wanted me to be, and I wasn't anything anybody wanted me to be, and I wasn't what the hell I wanted me to be. And I was 13 years old, and I drank about half a pint of whiskey, and all of that went away. And I was just by God exactly what I wanted to be. And I felt just by God exactly the way I wanted to feel. And I knew it, and I knew this is what I had always wanted, and I kind of knew this is what I'm going to always have. And then I threw up. But that was no problem, And later, when I came to AA, I read in the big book on page 569 where they describe a spiritual experience. And those things they described that are characteristic of a spiritual experience were the things that I felt when I drank whiskey. And then they said frequently these experiences are accompanied by sudden spectacular upheavals. Man, I was right on. That was it. I'd drink, I'd have this feeling, and then I'd have a sudden spectacular upheaval. But it never occurred to me that booze was a problem. I knew that there was a potential I was going to get in trouble for drinking. But that wouldn't have been because of the booze. That would have been because of my dad and how unreasonable he was. He was also an alcoholic. And when I started drinking, I drank just to have fun and to be somebody and to do things I couldn't do if I didn't drink. When I was 17 years old, the founder of AA, one of the co-founders of AA in Sumner County, Kansas, invited me to come to an AA meeting with him. When I was 17, I said, "Sure, Bill, what for?" And he said, "I think you're having trouble with your drinking." He was also the local automobile mechanic, and I had wrecked my car 3 times in something like 2 months, and he was doing the body work on it, and he said, "Why don't?" And I said, "Jesus Christ, Bill, maybe I was 60, but I knew I wasn't an alcoholic." And I mean, it was just totally out of the question. Then I went in the Navy, and when when I got out of the Navy, I married my high school sweetheart, my grade school sweetheart, a month before I got out of the Navy. And booze helped me with my marriage. And then booze helped me with my work. In 1962, I got a job as an engineer. And there were certain things that are required of engineers that I couldn't do, like write technical reports. I couldn't do it. And I mostly just drank on the weekends. You know, had these little patio parties. I was the beer organizer. And this was a Wednesday night, and I took this stuff home to work on, and I drank about half a pint of whiskey. And I'm telling you, I knew how to write technical reports. I had innovative ideas. They were, you know, and I discovered a technical vocabulary that I didn't know I had. The reports were praised. My boss, who had always criticized my reports, called me in and said, "Did you write this?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "I knew you would do it if you just give me the effort." And I remember thinking, effort, hell, I gave you effort, and that wouldn't do it. But I drank whiskey, and whiskey makes me more intelligent. But I didn't tell him that. I knew not to tell him. Let him think effort. They'll give you a raise for effort, you know, but I knew it wasn't effort, it was whiskey. And over a period of time, from then on at work, anything difficult I had to do, I did it, and I did it better because I drank whiskey. And then I did it better because I drank whiskey and took bennies. And this work, I didn't set the world on fire, but I went from a process analyst to an engineer to a senior engineer. And then I moved to Hughes in Culver City as kind of a senior engineer, and then the engineering supervisor. And then came that rotten year in 1972. And somebody asked me, actually my birthday is August the 4th, and 1972, my AA birthday. And somebody asked me one time when I took a birthday cake at Brentwood, it was hotter than hell, and they said, "How did you get sober when it was so hot?" And I immediately knew the answer. It was as quick as I could make it since New Year's Eve. You know, from New Year's Eve on, I was going to stop, and I, by God, could not, you know. And my boss demoted me, took me out of supervision. My wife was going to go get a divorce. She went to this crazy lawyer who told her that her husband sounded like an alcoholic. Why don't you just get him to go to AA? And, you know, what had happened was I had not came back to work on Friday after lunch. And then I missed Monday. God damn, boy, when I woke up Tuesday morning, I was in trouble. I knew I was in trouble. And I was not going to drink, you know. If there was one thing you could lay your life on, I am not going to drink. And I left my house, and I know when I got in the car, I wasn't going to drink. And you know, the next time I knew I wasn't going to drink, I was sitting that morning on the way to work. I was in the Tattletale, and I already had a double shot. And then I realized, hell, I wasn't going to drink today. Well, to hell with it. I am going to drink today. And I drank all day long. And I didn't get real sloshed, but I didn't call in at work. You know, to hell with Tuesday, too, you know. And I went home and told Pat that, you know, some people are born to drink, and I'm one of them. And do whatever you want to do. You want to go to a lawyer and get stuff put in your name, go do it. But I knew that if I lost my job and I was on Skid Row, I believed that the people on Skid Row could drink. And by God, I'm just born to drink. Okay? Now, the next morning, I went to work. And you know, something had happened that my boss had missed work Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I don't even think he was there Wednesday. I got off clean as a whistle. And so on the way home, of course, I got me a half a pint. And Pat came home and said, I went to see that lawyer. I said, what did he say? She said, well, there wasn't anything to put in our names. We don't have anything. And he said that you sound like an alcoholic. Why don't you go to AA? Well, the reason I didn't is because I just finished a half a pint, and I had my drinking problems in a lot better perspective, and I knew that I wasn't an alcoholic, and I said, if I ever lose control, I'll go to AA, but I don't think I've lost control. And she stayed, and I stayed, and so I had a convulsive seizure. I had what a doctor diagnosed me as being acutely intoxicated with probable alcoholic neuropathy. Now, I didn't find that out until after I was sober. I had gone to the doctor because I was seeing double, and my right leg wasn't working right. And he said, if you drank, I'd know what was wrong with you. And I called him all kinds of, I told him I didn't drink, which was a lie. But when he called me a liar, I was mad at this son of a bitch. And then later I went back to apologize to him to make amends, and I told him that, I said, I was drinking. And he said, yes, Howard. And he showed me what he had put down in my medical record was I was acutely intoxicated with probable alcoholic neuropathy. Outside of that, I had him fooled. And I was hopelessly in debt, and as many of you know, I had an opportunity to sell some equipment that I didn't own. Equipment that I found right before the owner lost it. And I gave it to this guy, and 10 days later, on July the 24th, I came to, and I had not been back to work. I'd left work Friday at lunch and hadn't gone back. I'd come back, but I was too drunk. And I left, and I was drunk all weekend. And on Sunday, I had gone in the Tattletale to try to sell them some equipment, to sell people in there. I was broke, and I hadn't gotten any money for this other deal, and I was going to cut the middleman out. And the next morning I woke up, and the first thing that I thought of was, I'm done at work. He's going to fire me for sure. He's had it with me. I'm not getting anything done. He can't keep me. And then I thought, Jesus, I wish I wouldn't have said anything in the Tattletale about selling test equipment because, and then it dawned on me, this stuff I'd stolen was owned by the federal government. Damn, I should have thought of that before I stole it, but I didn't. And then I could kind of see agents from the FBI going into the Tattletale saying, is anybody selling test equipment around here, And I experienced what is described on page 30 as a feeling of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I had not intended on being a thief, and I was. And I was going to be a disgrace to my kids, and I didn't want to be a disgrace to them. I was already a disgrace to them. But Jesus, hard time in a federal pen, God damn it, I got to stop drinking until this blows over. And I called Kenny Sixberry, who used to drink in the Tattletale. And in the Tattletale, we believed that Kenny had joined AA and was now president. And I would not have called the vice president. I only called the president. So I called Kenny and asked him, after I drank a half a pint, and I called him and asked him if he'd take me to an AA meeting, and he said he would. He said his home group was meeting that night, and he'd like to come and get me. He said, try not to be drunk, because if you're too drunk, I can't. The meeting won't help you, and you won't help the meeting. And I was taking a lethal dose of bennies every day. And I was drinking from 3 to 4 half pints every day, sometimes more, but I was, and the only reason I bought half pints because that was all I was going to drink. And I was going to baby the half a pint through the day. And so I drank 2 more half a pints, and I didn't know, by the time Kenny should have got there, I thought, what the hell did I call them for? Things are not that bad. I hope he don't come. But he came. And he took me to the Culver City Studio Group, which at that time met over on Wasika. And I was warmly welcomed. He introduced me to a guy named Frank Giroux, and to Chuck and Lee, and Steve. And I met everybody, and I was telling each person I wasn't an alcoholic. I remember telling Lee Beckler I'm not an alcoholic. And she just about argued with me, but she said, that's all right, you're in the right place, Everybody was saying that, except a guy named Charlie Pitts, Chuck Pitts. He told me that when he came to AA, he wasn't an alcoholic either. But he said, when I came to AA, I was always out of work. I was out of a place to live. He said, I was right on the bottom. And I come to AA, and I've always been welcomed here. And he said, I get sober, and my life starts coming together, and then he said, I slip. He said, I've slipped a lot of times. But he said, you don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to think you're an alcoholic, and you don't have to say you're an alcoholic to be a member of the studio group. The only requirement for membership there is a desire to stop drinking. And if you have such a desire and you think you'd like to be a member, you're a member. And nobody else even thinks about it. Everybody else is just glad that you're a member. And he said, whether you're here or not, your place, that's a hell of a nice thing to say. Whether I'm here or not, my place will always be here. Because he said nobody can take your place in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I know that I felt like maybe I'm in the right place. And then they read chapter 5. And I will tell you that I know from where I'm at today, looking back to where I was at when I came in, that I was a unique newcomer. There was never one like me before, nor has there been one like me since. Because the way I see myself when I came in, without any reason for this, I somehow was a person who thought I already knew it all. Very unusual for a newcomer. Now, if you would have said to me, you think you know it all, don't you? I would have said, no, I don't. I don't either. And then I'd said to myself, my problem is I feel inferior. I have an inferiority complex. That's my problem. I don't think well enough of myself. That jerk thinks I think I'm good. I don't think much of myself. But I'll tell you, I listened like someone listens who thinks they already know it all. And my mind worked like a guy's mind works who already knows it all. So when they read, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful, my mind said, cunning is not an attribute that you can assign to an inanimate substance like alcohol. Cunning requires intellect. Alcohol doesn't have an intellect. They've got that screwed up. Wrong metaphor. Then they said, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And this was a shock to me, who already knew it all, that AA had anything to do with God. Where did that come from? I had no idea. I'm not going to be part of any God thing. I am not going to be part of that and wipe out the goddamn wheat crop again. But then, the truth is, my mind said they just got through saying alcohol was powerful. And now they say God has all power. Well, you can't have that both ways. If God has all power, then alcohol can't have power. And if alcohol has power, then God cannot have all power. He can just have all power except what alcohol has. Now, when I'm thinking this stuff, I'm missing a lot of stuff that could be helpful. But I'm telling you, that's the way I was. And that was why I can tell you, I know why I was helpless and why I was hopeless. Except in AA. There is no other thing going in my life, in my culture, which has the foggiest notion how to help someone like that. Everybody that had ever tried to help me was nice to me, some of them were, but before they actually could start helping me, they had to tell me what was wrong with me. And as soon as they started telling me what was wrong with me, you could hear my mind slam shut. I could not listen to this. I could not stand it. I just get the hell away from me. But I came to AA, and nobody has ever told me what the hell's wrong with me. From the very first night, you told me what your life used to be like, what happened, and what your life is like now. You told me what you believed about alcoholism. You told me that you believed the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and it says alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control their drinking. That alcoholism is characterized by an obsession of the mind, an obsessive belief that in spite of countless vain attempts to do it, by God, today I'm just going to start this half a pint, and I'm going to baby this half a pint through the day. Today I'm going to do it. Never occurs to me that I've said that every day for a ton of days in a row and I've never done it, because the day is going to be different. I was obsessed with that. They told me that obsession was a characteristic of alcoholism, and that coupled with it was a physical reaction that's peculiar to alcoholics as a class of people, that when they drink alcohol, it manifests itself into a phenomenon of craving for more. Let me right off the hook, I remember at the break telling Kenny Sixberry, if a craving is the thing that distinguishes alcoholics from non-alcoholics, I'm not an alcoholic. I said, I didn't crave a drink. And he said, you mean if you drank a half a pint, you wouldn't crave another drink? No, I didn't crave a drink. I might want one, but I didn't crave it. He said, well, there's a type of alcoholic that we haven't talked about. And he said, there's a lot of this type in the program. And that's the type who, when they start to drink, keep slugging them down so fast that the craving doesn't have an opportunity to set in. He had me there. I identified with that. The second half of the meeting, and I'm not sure, I believe that Chuck Ennis read from page 93. I know at some time, and I think on that first night, he read from page 93 in the book, what says, emphasize to the newcomers the spiritual feature, emphasize that freely. But emphasize that when we talk about our higher power, we're talking about our own individual understanding of the higher power, and that whatever concept you have will work provided it makes sense. And I remember that. I remember a guy named John. He said, my name is John. They call me, I'm an alcoholic. We said, hi. He said, they call me John the Baptist. And John talked about Jesus. Jesus was his higher power. And that was all right. I'm not offended by that. And I don't hear people say that much anymore. But anyway, John shared that was his higher power, and I thought, well, that's all right, but that is not, I'm not going to go in for that. And they shared about somebody else's higher power was a doorknob. Just fit right in with what I thought of you guys anyway. And there was another guy whose higher power was the sun. Okay with me, but I am not into this. You know, and somebody said, fake it till you make it. Act as if. And I thought, you know, I tried that for 20 years. For all my life I tried that until I could get the hell away from it. And I could never fool myself. I can't fake it till I make it. And after the meeting, I told Kenny that I was an alcoholic, but AA couldn't help me. And he smiled and said, why is that? And I said, well, I'm not an atheist, but God doesn't change things in order to accommodate people and their problems. And there's nothing I'm going to do in those steps. And I'm an alcoholic, but AA is not going to be my answer. And he said, I'm glad you're not an atheist. He said, there's a lot of us that are atheists when we come in here. But he said it's probably easier for the people that aren't atheists to get a foothold in AA than the people that are. But he said, when you got into the truck to come to the meeting, the first thing you told me was you were not an alcoholic. Now you get in the truck to go home, and the first thing you tell me is you are an alcoholic, but that we can't help you, and there's nothing in the steps you're going to do. And there's no way for you to know it, but our first step, it says in the book, is if we fully concede to our innermost self that we're alcoholics, that is the first step. And he said, don't worry about the God thing. And then he told me something that has, you know, it's amazing how much a good start helps you go. And I got as good a start as anybody ever got in AA. I was just in the right place with the right people. And but Kenny said, you'll hear, he said, I go to meetings and I hear a lot of stuff that don't fit me. It don't make sense to me. Now, he said, I've learned to validate the person that says it. I have learned to say, well, that's good for them. That's working for them, but I'm not going to do that. But he said, sometimes, frequently, people will describe a problem that they're having that I've had all my life and didn't realize it until I've heard them talk about it. And then they'll describe a solution that really makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. And it's something that I need to do in my life to help me with the problem. He said, I try to do it. And he said, I've been doing that for nearly 8 years. He said, within 30 days, I'll be taking a cake for 8 years. And he said, I'm grateful to God for my sobriety and the great life I have. See, he had to spring the God stuff on me. He emphasized the spiritual feature freely, but he just talked about it for him. And he said, let's just go to meetings and listen, you know. And if somebody says something that sounds like it'll work for you, try it. And otherwise, just leave it. But keep coming to meetings. And I did that. I know he told me 30 days. And if you're not happy with your sobriety after 30 days, we'll be glad to refund your misery. After 30 days at 26th and Broadway on a Sunday night meeting, I told him the 30 days are up, and I'm not so happy. And he said, well, the 90 days aren't up. And I said, you didn't say 90. He said, I always say 90. He said 30. I also had to get the Lord's Prayer right. It is in earth as it is in heaven. I told him that, and he did not care. He acted like he did not care. And then he came home with me soon after, like my first week or so, to meet my wife. And I went and got the Bible and showed him in the King James Version, which some evidence used. It says, in earth as it is in heaven. He did not care. And I'll tell you, he still don't care. But I had, not that I had to be right. But I still say enter. But he and I went to meetings, and we had a lot of fun, and I heard a lot of wisdom. But I would pop off. My head would pop off. And I missed a lot of stuff because of that. But some of it took hold. I heard Ski from San Diego say that he was 36 years in learning that all the people that he hated didn't feel it, but it was killing him. Man, my head didn't pop off at that. Lee was the leader that night at the studio group, and had asked Ski to come up from San Diego, and he shared that. And at the next meeting I went to, which was a discussion meeting, they said, does anybody have a problem they want to discuss? Yes, Howard. And I said, how do you not hate people? And I bet you I got, 20 answers. Everybody had an answer. But the answer I remember was Patty Hicks. You'll hear people say that the old-timers will tell you to sit down, shut up, and listen. I've never had an old-timer tell me that. Patty Hicks had 2 weeks on me, and she told me that 90% of the time I met her, with her lousy 2 weeks. But what she said that night, what she said that night was, I just heard that you can't be hateful and grateful at the same time. Now that stuck with me. And she said, if you're a sober alcoholic, you have a basis for being grateful. If you're a sober alcoholic in AA, you have a basis for being grateful. Now I know that stuck with me, and I told people I didn't pray. Why don't you pray? Nobody cared why I didn't pray. Nobody cared whether I prayed or not, but I had to tell everybody. And this one guy said, well, I'm just like you. I never thought God never answered any of my prayers. I didn't pray, but he said I learned to meditate. Meditation helped me. What's that? Well, just read in the 12 and 12. Bill in chapter 11 tells you how to meditate. He said, that's what I started doing. Well, I read that, and Bill has you meditate or hold in your consciousness kind of the truth of the principles in the St. Francis of Assisi prayer. Well, that was like prayer as far as I was concerned, and I wasn't going to do that. But what I started doing was, in times of a crisis, I would spend the first few minutes of my day remembering how terrible my life was the last 3 weeks of my drinking. And during the last 3 weeks of my drinking, there was nothing in my life to stop the plummeting. The character and quality of my life was disintegrating. I was going nuts with anxiety and anger. I couldn't even talk on the goddamn phone. And in order for me to have the strength to face the day, I had to drink so much that I was shit-faced, And that was the last 3 weeks of my drinking. And then I would remember the last 3 weeks of my sobriety. And my sponsor had helped me take the equipment back that I had stolen. And I had a good, just gradually, and I wasn't doing the steps in order. I'd done the first step, and I was setting the tables and chairs up at the home group. Then I took the equipment back. I found Kenny tracked down that equipment, and I went to the bank and got the equipment, and I took it back. I never lost my security clearance. Nothing bad happened to me. I just got out of it by taking it back and doing the deal. And I would get up in the morning and I'd see how hopeless my life had been. And regardless of how threatening it seemed to me today, I was in better shape by far than I had been before I came to AA. And if I did that good, I'd finish it with a little feeling of optimism and gratitude. And you can't be hateful and grateful at the same time. It's just that the gratitude didn't last very long. But I kept coming to meetings and I kept doing this. And then I did the fourth step and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and the eighth. And I started reacting different without me intending to. I had always tried to be good up until I saw that I am not going to be good and get off my goddamn back. You know, I wanted to be good, but I could never do it. And I started reacting differently in difficult situations than I ever had. I also tell you that in 1974, in October, after my second birthday, I was reading in the 12 and 12, I'm quitting. I was reading in the 12 and 12 the statement that says, we learned we had to stop using our higher power as some kind of a bush league pinch hitter. And I thought, man, that's what I do. I only do this meditation when in crisis, times of crisis, you know. But when things are going good or halfway good, I'm not going to get up early and do that. You know, I got too many other, and I made a commitment that there wouldn't be a day pass in my life, a day at a time, that I didn't spend at least 30 minutes in that kind of meditation. And that is a commitment. I could never keep a commitment. My dad used to call me a quarter horse on a mile track, you know. But in AA, I have learned to keep my commitments. And I haven't missed a day in over 20 years without spending at least 30 minutes being conscious, in whatever way I'm being conscious, of the power of the program in my life, of my higher power in my life, God as I understand him. And I don't think God as I understand him has changed anything for me to have the best life of anybody I know. I don't think God changed anything for the Wright brothers to fly their airplane. That's just my belief. You know, Orville and Wilbur Wright had evolved to a level of intelligence and that they started to understanding the principles of aerodynamics. Their first flight was no further than the wingspan of Mr. Hughes's flying boat. The first heavier-than-air flight was that short, but they flew the damn thing, you know? And I'm convinced that Dr. Bob and Bill and Chuck Ennis and Chuck and Lee, these people were inspired to know principles of a spiritual nature which, when engaged in the life of an alcoholic, gives the alcoholic's life lift, gives them the capability to feel good and be conscious of the goodness in their life. I had to do the deal. I had to practice every day being conscious of it so that I could be conscious longer and longer of it each day. I have had to work for it. But I had worked all my life and had never gotten the payoff. You see, this really works. This really is the easier, softer way. So I don't think God changed anything. If I could have practiced these principles, you know, now part of that is coming to meetings where there's people that I can share with and that share with me. I mean, doing the whole deal. My life would have been lifted all my life. But anyway, I've got it now, and I'm grateful to you for it. And you know, I was telling Chuck, and I never cry. I never cry. But I went to the International Convention, and I went to the flag ceremony, and then the next morning I opened the San Diego Union, and there on the front page was a big, above the crease, was a big picture of a sober alcoholic holding the American flag with the deep mute symbol, I love you, and underneath it says a salute to sobriety. And I'll tell you, that puts a lump in my throat, and a tear in my eye, and joy in my heart. And I thank you guys for that.
Let's thank those who made the meeting possible. The names are not written down here. What? Let's hear from our secretary.
I tell you what, you have to put up with these alcoholics. I'm Chuck, an alcoholic. Dave, thank you for an excellent meeting. And to the newcomers, Bob, Melody, Dominic, Dan, Wes, Ted, and Randy, welcome. Keep coming back. And for the Chips, Tim, 6 months, keep coming back. And the birthdays, Dave for 12 years, Doug for 26 years, welcome and keep coming back. And Kathy, thank you, and keep coming back. We enjoyed you. And of course, about Howard, you know, I could tell you some things about Howard, but I won't do it because it's not very nice, you know. Howard, thank you. And the meeting commitments are Mary for the leaders, John for the setup of the meeting room, kitchen setup is Lee, sound is Dave, greeters is Rob and Bob, coffee is Mary, cheese and veggies is Candy, coffee is Marv, art is for the cookies, Carol is for the birthday cake, the treasurer is Gordon, literature and chips is Chris, and central service representative of Steve. Do you have any announcements, Steve?
My name is Steve. I'm an alcoholic and also your central service representative. We're running a little late, but it's that time to pass on information to you from central office, so I'm going to go ahead and do that as quick as I can. We had our zone meeting this past Thursday, and I have the minutes from that meeting here, and in it is the information that I kind of went through. I was going to be a little more organized tonight than I feel like I am right now, but so just bear with me, and I'm just going to pass on some statistics to you. If this doesn't seem important to you, don't feel alone. It didn't seem very important to me when I would hear CSR reports up at the podium. But I've gotten to believe that our central office performs a lot of services, and it's real important for our group as a whole to be able to have to go through this procedure that we're doing right now and to feel that connection as a group with central office. Okay, last month's phone calls, there were 11,242 calls to central office. There were 223 12-step calls made by central office. Quick financial report, and I'm just going to read this. It shows a year-to-date net income or cash receipts in excess of expenses of $21,000. Last year at the same time, we had $29,139 loss as of May 31st, and this year it was a $21,000 positive. Last year, net assets at the exact same time in May was $117,000. This year, they were $179,000. A lot of figures here, but it's kind of important to show that. So we had come up with $61,000 during that period of time. We are to a point where we are getting near to the prudent reserve, and that means that things are going well. Now, for a lot of you, you probably remember that last year things weren't going very well with central office financially. So that all that's changing in a very positive way. A few words from Bob Kaplan, who's the office trustee, and again, I'm just going to read this. Donations are down, and I don't know what the reason is for that. And we're going to work on a little bit. They may be a feeling of complacency going on in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, central office is okay now. Let's send the money to the church that we are, where we have our meeting at. There are lots of meetings doing that, and that doesn't make it for Alcoholics Anonymous. It violates the traditions, number one, and number two. Central office is still in need of donation support because you don't have to get into the spot that we were in before. Okay, so that's a certain part of the donations that we make at this group does go to central office. Also, from Bob Kaplan still, we are going to put on a 12-step workshop as we were directed by Central Service Committee last month. It is going to be a pretty exciting deal. We are coming to an agreement for a date. We have a speaker picked out, and it's a big guy from the west side. There's no date, but the place is going to be probably at the Wilshire Plymouth Church, and as a date comes about, I'll pass that information on to you. Okay, I've got a copy of Hello Central. I'm going to leave this up here at the podium for anybody who's interested in taking a look at it. It's a way that you as an individual can connect with central office. $7 a year for monthly issues that are mailed to you, and it's full of lots of information that pertains to us as alcoholics and central office. Also, new directories are out. I don't see any, but I'm sure that in the near future we'll be seeing some on the table over here. Thank you for letting me be of service.
What was I at? Thank you, Steve. Sky will sign the court cards. Any of you have them? Sky, will you stand up, please? She will sign the cards for you. Meeting room cleanup is Alan. Kitchen cleanup is Shirley. And please do what you can to help us wrap things up tonight so we can all go home early. Put the tables away and the chairs. And again, I want to thank the speakers. And if I had more time, I could tell you some stories about my old friend, but we'll let that go. Good night and thank you.
I want to thank my readers, Chuck for Chapter 5 and Carol for the 12 Traditions. I'll now read a vision for you. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road to happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.